Hey. Okay. Hey, welcome everybody. Stone Fruit Roll-Up now at high noon, chiming in 5 minutes after our start time because I had some serious technical difficulties in the studio, which is what live is all about. So I'm super excited. I've booted poor Jude Charles out of our studio while I figured out what was wrong with us technically, and I've asked him to kind of jump back in with a fresh link. So if we can be a little patient and wait for the poor man to come back, bless his heart. And when I tell you what happened, we're gonna laugh out loud. I am super excited for anyone who's joining us live on LinkedIn and in the studio today because we are going to have an incredible conversation with Jude Charles. I met Jude at the Copywriter Club in Real Life conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and he wasn't the first speaker to get on stage, but he essentially was the first person to get my attention. So here finally in the studio is our esteemed guest, Jude Charles, who I'm going to welcome in now. Hey!
Rebecca, how are you?
This show is like meta and transparent as it can be, so I will tell you what happened. Guess what happened?
What happened?
As I was pushing like the mic and my studio setup a little bit just to kind of give myself room, unbeknownst to me, I shoved my wireless keyboard underneath like enough of a book that it was triggering a space bar. It wasn't letting me do anything at all. So you have been the kindest, most patient person with all of my foibles. And I'm so happy to talk to you because something from my notes from your stand-up talk at TCC IRL 22, which I already let the audience at home know is the first time I was mesmerized by your presence, was how to create a process that propels growth and prevents burnout. And this keyboard foible is indicative of that kind of overwhelm that someone can feel when they're taking on an attempt to gain visibility. And so when I started the show, I knew that it would be such a goat get if I could bring you to the table and help me figure out how to make the most out of doing something like this and get really deep into it with your ideas around dramatic leverage and dramatic demonstration and proof and all of the things. So I can't thank you enough for coming on the Roll-Up today and being a part of this conversation.
I can't thank you enough for inviting me. It is an honor, it's a pleasure. When we first met last year, which feels like so much longer, but it was truly powerful. I think we were able to have dinner. It wasn't just meeting you at the conference. We were able to have dinner. We were able to just learn more about what you're doing and how you're doing things. You have transitioned slightly. I think you're still doing some of the same work, but yeah, it's just an honor to be here to have this conversation with you and to go deep into leverage. I think, especially after experiencing burnout, it is important to understand the way you work and whether or not you're just doing too many things, right?
We do too much.
Yeah.
We play too much. For anybody who hasn't heard your story about burnout, it's so profound to have someone actually say the quiet part out loud. I feel like even the most seasoned entrepreneurs are just like working themselves to the bone. If I'm not working on a Saturday or like kind of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do some stuff, I feel behind and I keep adding things to my plate to up level my business, but I don't think you would recommend that.
Absolutely not. On October 10th, 2020, I woke up one morning and my teeth were clenched, my heart was racing, and although I opened my eyes, I could not move my body. I was physically paralyzed from the neck down. This lasted for about 2 hours, and when I was finally able to get out of bed, I ended up calling my therapist because I had been seeing a therapist at this time, and I understood that this was very mental and not just physical. What came from this phone call with my therapist and then going to see him is the diagnosis of burnout, depression, and anxiety. I had learned that burnout, or what I was feeling, was a physical manifestation of burnout, um, that means that it had lingered for too long. Now, what is burnout? Because I think there's some misconceptions about what burnout is. Burnout is a heightened state of stress for too long. Now, we naturally as human beings go through stress. That is not something we can escape. It's not like you're going to come out of burnout and never go through anything else. You're going to have to go through stress. But there is an up and down, there is a cadence to stress. And as much as you might have, just as much as you're going through stress, there's a moment where you should come down from stress. And I had spent too much time in this heightened state of stress, doing too many things, that I, my body just gave out. It was like, enough is enough. And so that is the moment that I realized it. And there were these other small moments that happened afterward that helped me rebuild my identity. My identity was tied to my work. Right? I had
I,
to learn how to unravel that in order to rebuild.
I think that right there is the $10,000. The 10th, I don't know, the $24,000. The big aha moment is when your identity is tied so closely to your work. You say something like so profound in dramatic demonstration when you're talking about a unique mechanism, which I'd love to hear more about because frameworks are such a hot topic right now. When that is not, when your uniqueness is not about your framework or your process, but about who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So if that's true, how did you extract yourself from like my work is my worth and step into you are the thing that's valuable, which is another profound thing that you said at TCCR IRL, which was you are the value, not the work. I'm rambling and should
Well,
definitely turn the mic over to you.
here's the thing. It took a lot of work. It didn't happen overnight. Um, I went to the grocery store, and I never imagined that going to the grocery store would mean having to be called upon to save someone's life. I went to the grocery store, and as I got out of the car, walking to the front door of this grocery store, I hear a loud bang to my left. And when I look over, I really couldn't believe my eyes that there was a white Tesla car sitting on top of another car.
I've seen
Now,
these pictures, dude. It's bananas.
it is not a misstatement. It is one car sitting on top of another car. I run over. There are these two guys standing there. They were already outside, but they're standing there in shock. There's the woman in the car in the white Tesla, and she's trying to climb out. And I'm like, "Don't move. Are you okay?" And then I asked the two guys, "Did anybody call 911?" And they're just sitting there staring in shock. And I actually get in. Did anyone call 911? Well, I ended up calling 911. And as we're waiting for the police and fire department to show up, the car, so this woman happened to be on two different cars. The one that she was just completely on top of, the other that she was kind of leaning on. What I didn't realize was that there were three people trapped in that car that she was leaning on. And luckily, again, police and fire showed up and everybody ended up being safe. But what it taught me is that in the heat of the moment, when it matters, I am able to show up under pressure. Right. And that was a very powerful moment for me because up until that point, I'm going through burnout. I'm trying to rebuild and I'm being told that I need to change the way that I work. But my work is tied to my self-worth. So how do I do that? And it was that critical moment that helped me understand who I am in just everyday scenarios and really understanding who I am. Like that's the most critical piece out of who am I? When I show up to a live like this with you, Rebecca, who am I? When I show up to TCC IRL and I'm standing on stage, who am I? When a car accident happens, who am I? It takes that level of paying attention, the self-awareness to even understand all these things. And so, yeah, it in that moment, I began to literally journal. I have been journaling, and it's one of the most important things I've ever done, which is journaling everyday moments, what's happening, how it's happening, what I'm processing as it's happening, in order to rebuild Jude Charles. Jude Charles outside of work. Jude Charles, the person, the human being.
I think that that's the struggle that, at least in my clientele, that is really the identity crisis that people kind of come to the table with. We look at it through the lens of copy or brand strategy, but generally it's an identity crisis of not being able to articulate who am I. And it's like I said at the beginning, top of the show, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to live an authentic brand, I'm going to be so genuine. But when we don't know who that is, was it just the constant self introspection that helped you get there? The journaling, like what was it in you that led to your own, like to know yourself, to know yourself to see yourself for the first time and fall in
I
love?
think the most important part is knowing what you think. We are inundated with ideas and thoughts from other people that we don't spend enough time with ourselves. When I went through burnout in October of 2020, I took 3 months off. And I literally one thing is I was seeing a therapist twice a week just to unravel everything. But the second is journaling and understanding, okay, if I'm not working and I show up to this thing, who am I? I have 5 core values, which are probably the most important that I had spent time working on.
I was going to bring that up. Core values.
The first one is adventure. The second one is depth versus width. Third is story. Fourth is freedom, which there are 4 different types of freedoms. And the 5th one is escaping me, but I will remember eventually. But let's talk about freedom for a second. Freedom is the 4 different types of freedoms that I believe in is client freedom, so choosing the clients I work with, time freedom, which is just, being able to work on my schedule, location freedom, being able to work from anywhere in the world, and then financial freedom. And if I don't have those 4, I don't feel like I have freedom. So that's really important. Adventure is literally what it sounds like. For my 30th birthday, I skydived out of an airplane because I like to do adrenaline-filled activities. I've gone zip lining over the ocean in Haiti. Like, adventure is really important to me. Being curious is really important, which is tied to adventure. Storytelling is obvious, but there's also a critical piece in storytelling. The most important story that you tell is the story you tell yourself.
Man.
And then
that's deep.
And then there's depth versus width, which in every interaction, within the first 10 minutes of us having this conversation, you can tell that I'm a very deep person. To me, depth is the most important part to life. And until we can go 3 levels deep, it's not just the surface level. Until we can go 3 levels deep, even the dinner that we had, the conversations that we were having were deep.
Agreed.
And so
life is too short for small talk, Jude.
Absolutely.
And because we had that depth of conversation, that's why I was able to, humbly and meagerly reach out from the ether and get an immediate yes, because you are building relationships, you are building trust, and you are really kind of being vulnerable with each other, which I think is you do so brilliantly. Not share your vulnerability with burnout. Yeah. I think also the other side of the coin for this is around courage. And
Yes.
you say in dramatic demonstration that it's courage to act on your ideas, to defy challenges, to defy advice, defy, the way everyone telling you it should be done, to have the courage to be embarrassed. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm embarrassed on this show probably every time, where I'm just like clunking along Fred Flintstone style to make something of it, and I don't even know what I'm making
Right.
exactly. I'm in such an experimentation phase with it, but it does require, like, you gotta. It's not for the faint of heart. Let's say that.
Not at all. And I remember the fifth one, which is the fifth core value, which is relentless, which is tied to courage. It is incredibly difficult to stand on what you believe in. It is not easy because, like I mentioned, there are a lot of voices, a lot of noise out there. When I started this business, video production business, I started at 17 years old. And I started because a teacher, Mrs. Donnelly, believed in me so much that she purchased my first set of business cards, which I still have to this day.
Shout out
But
to Mrs. Donnelly.
but what comes with that is I'm the youngest of 10 children. My parents are immigrant.
Let's not forget that grit factory.
My parents are immigrant parents, and the one thing you were taught is you go to school, you go to college, then get a good job. That is the route that you take, and I didn't take that route.
How'd that
And
go
no
over?
one and it didn't go over well, and no one believed that this video production thing that I was starting was more than just a hobby. But it takes courage to keep going. It takes courage to have your car being repossessed for the second time in 8 months, and a client calls you to tell you she's made $1 million while you're struggling to make $20,000, and
That's like the
decide in that moment that you're going to continue regardless of what just happened.
to believe in it when no one else believes in it
Right.
is an exercise in existentialism that's not for the faint of heart. And I think entrepreneurialism is, there's part of it where you are following kind of what everybody else wants to do, and then like maybe the road less traveled is around identifying a new and innovative way of doing something or solving a problem, but having to buck. Leading edge is lonely. Let's say that
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure.
Leading is lonely because you have a vision and mission that only you can see. Now you can communicate it to others. And you can try to help them see it, but only you believe it in the way that you believe it because you've sat with it for so long. And part of dramatic demonstration for me is trying to make things tangible for other people. At this TCC IRL talk that you first saw me in, it wasn't just talking about burnout as much as talking about how to get out of burnout. Because it
In
wasn't
a sustainable way, though. Like, how do
right.
you create? Okay, you were playing before making cupcakes, but now we're going to make a wedding cake, but we're going to do it smarter and and differently, and that wedding cake isn't going to exhaust you.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
the moment that we want to get to. But I have to interrupt us just for a second to acknowledge that we're live and that we actually have an audience here, and that we have Jill, who's coming in from London, and we have Tony, who's in Maryland. And Tony wants to know, if you have a formula, equation, or otherwise way to determine when you're doing too much stuff.
I don't know that I have an equation or formula, but I do pay attention to the exhaustion that my body feels when I'm going through work. Now that I've built it into my business where I take 2 months off. I used to do this November, December. Now I do it June and December. Um, and that was important to me because I would realize I was extremely exhausted at the end of the year and didn't really take breaks. Right. So that's one part of it. The other part is that I only work 4 days a week, at most 4 to 5 hours a day within those 4 days. Um, but I pay attention to the physical reactions that I have. What do I mean by that? February of 2022, I took on one of the biggest projects I've ever done. Our very first shoot Went with a client, went amazing. It was a 5-day shoot, went amazing as well as it could go. But on the plane ride back home, I cried the entire time on the plane. It was the stress leaving my body. It was finally the release of everything. But it was me understanding that once I got back home, I needed to take a couple of days off. I don't have an equation. I wish I, even to this day, 3 years out of burnout and all of that, I wish I did. But it's paying attention to my body, because I now understand that my body, by the time that my body reacts to burnout, that means that it's becoming too late. And so I need to immediately take action and do the things necessary to take time off. How do you do that? You build it into the business. I have it at a point now where I build it into the business. I just came off of a 10-day trip, and I took 4 days off from this 10-day trip. But I built that in knowing that I needed the time off. It is not easy. I wish there was an equation. I wish it was as simple as an equation. Everybody's different. People can handle different levels of stress. I would just pay attention to the physical manifestation of that stress, how you're dealing with it, whether or not a big part of burnout is whether or not you just want to get up in the morning, whether or not you have the energy to get up in the morning. That's a big part of it too. And so
what if you don't?
Stay in the bed.
Give yourself permission to stay in bed.
Yes. And it's okay. It's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to not be productive, I think.
It's okay to not be productive, because even if I sit in front of the computer and try to be productive, I'm not really being productive, because my mind isn't working at optimal levels. My body isn't working at optimal levels. And so to me, that's what it's about. And then there's 3 things that I do every day now that are most important to me: writing, working out, drinking enough water. I call it the 3 W's. Writing, working out, drinking enough water. If I do those daily, and working out isn't specifically like going to the gym. Sometimes it's just a 30-minute walk outside. Mm-hmm. If I do those 3 things daily, it helps me get through the rest of, not only the rest of the day, the rest of the week, rest of the month, but I need to do those 3 things daily to be at optimal levels. Even on the days that I'm not working, I do those 3 things to keep myself in shape. And in shape isn't just physical shape, it is the mental shape of all of that.
I think you've also figured out how to transform how you work. So the first thing I'm hearing is like compassion and acknowledging the capacity we all have and what burnout will do to us. The second one is having compassion to rest for that and building, like baking time off in the DNA of your schedule. But the third thing we haven't really started talking about yet is the way that you're able to work and do creative work and creative projects in a way that leverages your brand so effectively that you can do less of the noise stuff. So you're not spinning out on the hamster wheel of like Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. I got to do all the things. You have a formula of creating a connection with your audience through your medium. And you've kind of been doing it actually during this whole live of like behind the scenes and giving interior thoughts and telling stories of how, illustrating your core values. For those of us who feel like we're on the hamster wheel, know that like video storytelling is probably the medium, or maybe writing, or maybe straight up podcasting. How do you start thinking about producing this stuff in a way that isn't going to further exacerbate the burnout and also actually work? Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. There are 5 dramatic demonstrations. There's behind the scenes, live illustration, social proof, unique mechanism, and transformation. Behind the scenes.
I'm sorry, Jude, I'm talking over you, but the transformation piece, I cannot wait. I can't wait to get into it.
So behind the scenes is what happens when no one is looking, right? So when no one's looking, I'm writing, I'm working out, I am um, drinking water. That's behind the scenes. But what happens? Why does that matter? Uh, unique live illustration is the Jenga set that I used when I was speaking at um, TCCIRL, and I used this Jenga set, and there were words written on the Jenga blocks like spending too much time on social media, redoing your website, listening to too many podcasts. And I took out the pieces, and instead of when you normally play Jenga, you put the piece back on top, I took out the piece and just sat it to the side. And when you realize is when you take out the piece, I think I took out 16 pieces altogether, the structure still holds. That's live illustration. I'm illustrating what you need to do in order to get out of burnout. Social proof is how people react, the visual manifestation of how people react to you. Unique
Can I
mechanism.
ask you a question about that Jenga situation?
Yes.
I could be misremembering this, but I feel like you had a couple people in the front row who were playing it, and we didn't know that they were part of the shtick. So not only was that right? Am I
That is
remembering
correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not only did you like illustrate, how you were able to pull out like the noise out of your schedule without losing any value and integrity, but you like literally like, gave the entire audience something to feel about it. Like I, as a recovering people pleaser, had insane anxiety about how rude it was to you. So I was like, oh my God. They're like, I couldn't even kind of like parse how, anxious it made me. And then other people were fascinated by it.
Yeah,
And then other people kind of thought it was a secret. So like, it wasn't just you use Jenga to be like, and here's how you pull social media distraction out of your life and everything is fine. But you also gave us all a mood about it.
Yes.
That seems like it's intentional.
Yes, it's very intentional. So dramatic demonstration overall is not just telling the story, but showing the story in a way that other people feel the emotion behind it. There's this core value that most businesses and people like to use. We are a business of integrity. Okay, but what does that look like? What does that feel like? Tell me a moment in time where you did the right thing and it cost you $20,000 deal, right? So yes, there is a level, and I appreciate you mentioning it because when I would take out the piece or look at the piece and I would say, who listens to too many podcasts and needs to stop listening to so many podcasts? There would be a person that raised their hand and I'd throw the piece at them.
I carry mine around in my backpack.
The beauty of that is what you just mentioned. There are people who still have their pieces as a reminder of either things they need to take away or things they need to add. There were 3 pieces to add: courage, core values, and confidence. And so, yes, that's a part of live illustration. Unique mechanism, we've talked about it in the very beginning, which is your personality and who you are as a person. Transformation is not just the before and after. It is life after. Fitness coach who works with women who are over 40 received a text message from her client, and the text message was of an empty airplane. And then in the text message, it says, this is the first time in my life, this client is over 40, this is the first time in my life I'm getting on an airplane and I don't have to ask for a seatbelt extension. That is life after having to not go through the anxiety, the embarrassment, the discomfort of asking for a seatbelt extension. Life after.
I know it well.
Life
That's
after
powerful.
has completely changed. Okay, so I wanted to lay that out, dramatic demonstration. Why does any of that matter? I'm going to give you 2 very practical examples. I have at this point been on maybe 150 podcasts as a guest.
You've been on a mission for podcasts. And I was ready, and because I believed in you so much, meeting you at that dinner, I was ready to Sherpa it with you. I was like, who can I get? Who can I get to really help you do it? Yeah. And it's because of the authenticity you carry with you and this like calmness and peace that people want to be enrolled in whatever it is you're doing, and I don't care what the project is. If I know someone, I'm going to make the connection, and
Yeah,
that's very, very powerful.
and you made a lot of great connections. Now, to most people listening and watching this, it sounds exhausting to be on 150 podcasts. Now, the behind the scenes of that is I did not do them all at one time. I have laid it out where there were different seasons. So I'm up to my 9th season right now. But here's the part that's most critical. We talk about leverage. Before my first book came out, I had been on 50 different podcasts. So my first book is Dramatic Demonstration: How to Attract Premium Clients and with visual storytelling. How to attract premium clients and scale your business with visual storytelling. Now, the audiobook is not just me reading the book. I don't read the entire book. The audiobook has segments of podcasts that I've been on that also illustrate the points that I'm making in the book. I am leveraging this time that I've spent on podcasts, which most people, it'll just be a graphic on their Instagram to say, hey, I was on this podcast, or even an audiogram. I've taken it a step further to incorporate it in an audiobook that further illustrates the point and makes this experience, which is what dramatic demonstration is really all about, creating a different kind of experience for people so that they understand the concept in this book. It's very meta. I created a dramatic demonstration of dramatic demonstration.
Oh, it's no doubt. Every single thing in here, like, oh, and as the example is exactly what I'm reading right now.
Right.
In a very powerful way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it is very meta. The point is you're working too hard. And there are ways to look at your business and look at, okay, I've done this, but how do I create more assets from the thing that I've already done? Not trying to do anything brand new, but what have I already done, and how do I create more assets from that compound over time that have led to where we are today?
That's the word. That's such an interesting phrase, compound assets. I get it immediately. That's why, to me, live streaming is such an incredible vehicle to go with, because you have the live, which is exciting, and you get to talk to people in the comments. Jill wants to know the number of that coach that got the seatbelt extender. So you got that happening in the comments, and then we'll have a recorded video. Yes. So then we can share that. You can, embed it on your page. Yes. But also we could be infusing, snippets from this. We can strip out the audio and make, add it to our podcast. We can repurpose it. We can create a best of show. We can do a million different things. Yes. But that still requires some level of orchestration. Mm-hmm. And that can feel overwhelming. So how do you solve that problem, Jude?
There's no easy solution. There is definitely required thought to making sure to execute this in a way that is powerful. But here's the most important piece. It saves you more time in the long run. We first met TCCIRL last year, but I have been speaking at TCCIRL for 5 years straight. And there is the very first time I spoke, which I think was in 2019 or 2018, that I wore a black cape. Now, by the time you and I met, that black cape had nothing to do with my speech or my talk, but people continued to ask for it.
I totally remember seeing you in the audience because it was like the first day, and I was like, is that guy wearing a cape? I had no idea who you were. I didn't know you were going to get up on stage. It was honestly my first big girl copywriter conference. So I was really new to it, but I was like, is that guy wearing a cape? And then I'll never forget it.
Yeah. That is the point. You'll never forget it. It's a very small thing, but people remember it year after year. I did it once and it continues to work for me, but it took thought to even get to that point. The reason I wore the black cape for people who have never seen who have never been to TCCIRL is because I was paying homage to David Ogilvy, back in the 60s used to wear this full-length black cape. He is a very well-known copywriter and advertiser, but he wore a full-length black cape to his meetings. And it was an illustration of what dramatic demonstration is. It helps you stand out from the crowd, right? And
But it's not just for shtick's sake, though.
it's
Like,
not.
you know, we could be wearing like clown shoes and stand out from the crowd, but that doesn't mean that that our work's gonna like that people are gonna be like, I have to hire that lady. She wore clown shoes.
Not at
It's
all.
there's an intentionality around it. To your point of your core value of deeper versus what you know more depth and width.
Yes, absolutely. And it takes time. So to answer your question, it takes time to come up with these ideas. It takes thought. But in doing so, in training your mind to see these dramatic demonstrations and training your mind to understand, okay, this is the real leverage I can get out of this. You work smarter, not harder.
That's it right there.
And that is not easy to do. This is why a lot of people don't do it. It's easier to just do. Because when you're doing things, it feels good, it feels new. So just do it. But if you slow down long enough to think about, okay, what am I really doing and why? One question I love that's very simple is why.
And the more you ask it, sorry to talk over you, I apologize.
No, you're okay.
But the more you ask why, like, oh well, why? If you can get 5 whys, then you can get really deep.
Absolutely. Why. And that is why I do what I do. Being on 150 podcasts is really all about my mission and purpose to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage. If I can continue to do that, even if there was no one watching this right now, we know there is. Like, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Tony. But even if there were nobody watching and commenting, the fact that I'm sitting here with you, Rebecca, and I'm talking to you through these things, and I'm just being simply patient when we had technical issues in the beginning, I have fulfilled my purpose and mission, right? It's not just the 150 podcasts that have probably reached hundreds of thousands of people. It is the 150 different podcast hosts who I am reaching as well. The leaders, the people who are assembling these audiences that I am instilling this courage, this relentless, unwavering courage to continue to do the work that they're doing as well. And so it takes thought. It takes time. It takes intention. None of this is easy, but it is worth it. And that is why I continue to do the work that I do.
How did you decenter the desire for sales and to build your business from these efforts? That's what I'm hearing here, is it doesn't matter if no one's watching. It doesn't matter if no one listens. I show up for the podcast because that's the space that I'm holding with someone else. That's divesting yourself from like, will this get me clients? And kind of the future of business development, the hustle of it. How did you decentralize yourself from?
That is a great question. I want to unpack that. I don't know is the answer. Like, the initial thought that I'm having is I don't know, other than I show up with purpose. It is this doing this. So I've been on 150 podcasts. It has not been profitable, like financially, if we think about the hardcore numbers behind it. But it has been profitable personally and spiritually. And that creates a different level in how I show up. One thing I'm very clear about is that when clients are hiring me, they're not hiring me for video production or for even storytelling. Clients are hiring me to lead them through the process. And the process is really a process of success and transformation. Understanding and being empathetic and slowing down are qualities that help me continue to lead my clients through the process. When I first told the story of burnout at TCC IRL, I remember there was someone who walked up to me afterward and she said, "Thank you for sharing. I had been going through something for a very long time and never understood what it really was until you shared." That level of transformation is priceless to me than whether or not that person, this woman, buys my product or whether or not she becomes a client. The money will come. I have been blessed that I've been in this business 17 years and I will continue to make money. That is not an issue or a challenge, but it is incumbent upon me. Let me actually say it a different way. What's the point? if this is only about money, what's the point? Because money is very one dimensional. I like to look at things from a 3-dimensional way. The transformation I've left this woman with is so much deeper than simply whether or not she buy my product. Now, will she end up buying it, or has she bought it since then? Maybe, but that's not top of mind for me. What's top of mind is, have I left this person different than the way they were before they met me? And it's that courage that I walk, and that's why I say courage is not easy, but when I show up in that way, it doesn't make financial sense, but it makes spiritual sense. And that is why I continue to show up. That is why, let's talk about the behind the scenes of setting up this interview. We didn't have a time set up, and we had to change. And for most people, for most people, they would have just said, hey, today's not going to work. Let's do it a different day.
Yeah.
We worked it out. Even showing up and there were technical difficulties, you didn't hear me saying, hey, look, I've only got a limited amount of time. I don't know what you're going to figure it out. I sat with you. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to, because I've never used StreamYard, so I didn't have the answers. But the way you show up is different. And again, it's hard for me to answer this question because you're absolutely right. There is a level of these two worlds do not live together. Financial and being vulnerable or showing up and doing these things, but they are important to the human part of me. They're important to the being. I don't focus so much on doing as much as just being. And as long as I show up as my human being, everything else, I strongly believe, I have the faith that everything else will work out.
I think that we're also talking about the difference between being in a reactive state and in a creative state. So in a reactive state, obviously it's like, oh, the clients, the business, is this going to work? Is this going to be a sale? Is she going to get her shit together? Should I have abandoned this? Why did I say yes to this live opportunity? And you can shake that off and just be in a creative state where you're really are holding space with someone to do the work. And probably that's the secret formula of how you were able to decentralize like the money or the sales opportunity. I saw Bryan Cranston recently talk about how he used to show up for auditions trying to get a job. And when he stopped trying to get a job, do you know this one?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. When he stopped trying to get a job and just showed up to act, he never had a problem getting work again. I also saw Leslie Jones in an interview recently, and she said that she was coached by someone where she just felt like she was just going to give up. She was trying to get her stand-up career going. And a friend said, as soon as you shake desperation off of you, you will make it. And she was like, of course I'm desperate. I'm broke. And he's like, you're not broke. You just don't have any money. But if you shake this desperation off of you, that's when you'll have arrived. So all of those three stories between Bryan Cranston and Leslie Jones and you really are bringing to mind that it's about being in a creative state instead of an active state, being calm, slow, and intentional with what you do. And just making these kind of efforts in your business to compound as much as you can into a concentrated ball of awesomeness. And I don't know, let go and let God, I might want to say at this point.
No, I think it is. So it is letting go and let God. It is, people can, in the same way that people can feel confidence, they can sense confidence, they can sense desperation. And clients aren't wanting to work with entrepreneurs who are desperate. They want to know, and here's why this is important. Will you do it just for the money, or will you do it to make sure that you deliver on what you say you will deliver on? Clients can sense when you're just talking a good game. But they can also sense where, Jude's going to figure it out. In July of 2014, I went to a leadership conference. And leadership has always been important in my life. The leadership conference was in Spokane, Washington. And it's a 3-day conference. And I knew coming from a 3-day conference, it was going to be a lot to digest and take in. So I had this crazy idea. I live in Florida, which is the furthest southeast point of America. Washington State is the furthest northwest point of America. And I had this crazy idea, Rebecca, that I would take a Greyhound bus from the furthest northwest point to the furthest southeast point. I'm 25 years old. I know it would never happen again. But again, I wanted to digest this information that I know I would get from this conference. So I did so. It's the dumbest idea I've ever had. I was miserable by day 2. I had my phone off, but I turned my phone back on. And I get this text message from my sister, and it says, "Call me back. It's urgent." I braced myself because in July of 2014, this is July 2014, in March of 2014, my father had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Earlier that year as well, my mother was suffering from depression and had attempted suicide before. So I knew it was either mom or dad. I call my sister. It ends up being dad. They found him unresponsive in the home. Now, I'm on the road, but I know what that means. They don't want to tell me that he's passed away, but I know that's what it means. He's passed away. I take the first flight back home to Fort Lauderdale. I leave Chicago, Illinois. I get off the Greyhound bus and take a cab to the airport. And I go from Chicago, Illinois to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My brother comes to pick me up from the airport. He comes with his daughter, my niece, Ayana. I hug my brother. I don't say a word. I hug my niece. I don't say a word. But I sit in the back seat with my niece, Ayana. Ayana is 9 years old at the time, and I'm 25, youngest of 10 children, but I never imagined that I would lose my father at such an early age. He would never get to see me get married or have kids. But as I'm staring out the window, Ayana says to me, "Uncle, why did Grandpa have to die?" And I just stared at her because I don't know how to respond to a 9-year-old who's this is their first time going through death. And she says it again. "Why did Grandpa have to die?" We get to my father's house. We're making funeral arrangements, going through the process of figuring out what to do with his things. But I'll never forget August 9th, 2014, on the day we go to lay my father to rest. I, Jude Charles, the youngest of 10 children, am asked to give my father's eulogy. And it's in that moment that I understand why Grandpa had to die. My purpose is leadership. It is to lead through difficult moments, or the way that I like to put it, to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage, because it's in those difficult moments that it takes courage to show up, to lead your family, to lead your clients. To me, that is the story that I hold and how I show up in everything. Will I make money? I believe I will. Will it happen in the way that I'm thinking? Maybe not. But I continue to show up. I continue to lead. And I do believe in the fact that storytelling is what connects us in a very deep way. And so I lean into that and I just share my story over and over, both the good and the bad. Because if I were to die today, that's what I leave people with, is this level of transformation that comes from story. Story is all about a very specific moment in time. It's a recounting of a very specific moment in time. And then the lesson that you learn from that moment in time. The lesson is what you leave people with, but they remember the lesson because of the story, the journey that you took them through. And so that's what I lead with. I lead with story. I lead with purpose. And I trust, and I have seen over and over, we haven't talked the financials, but I run a business where it's 6 figures per project. So it's worked.
It has worked.
Right.
That's awesome.
And it's why I believe in it. It's why I believe in dramatic demonstration. It is my life's work. It is what I've been doing for the last 17 years in my own business and in my client's business, is continuing to tell stories and show the stories so that other people will believe and join us on this journey together.
Well, one thing you said that I have in my little purple notebook from this talk was that you can fake that you care, but you can't fake how you show up for people. Show up for people is also one of my core values. Since we're on the core value kick, I wanted to share that with you. And you absolutely show up for people in crisis and in otherwise.
Yeah.
Tell the people at home where they can find you. Let's not assume that we only have 2 eyeballs on this live, and this is going to lead directly to some incredible opportunity for you. Tell the
Yes.
folks at home where they can find you.
JudeCharles.co is where you can find me. That is where you can join the newsletter, Dramatic Leverage newsletter, where I talk about self-leadership, storytelling, mindset, specifically though the business of storytelling. And how do you show up in a way that completely transforms your business? Dramatic Leverage newsletter. Go to JudeCharles.co. You can find it there and join us on this journey. One more thing I want to mention: everything I do is very intentional. I remember, Rebecca, when we first met, and you knew I was selling the book. You asked me, "This is a premium book. Why are you selling it? Like, what's the pricing strategy behind it?" There is a strategy behind everything that I do. It's very intentional. The newsletter is not just one where you get to put in your name and email and that's it. You have to apply and be accepted to join the newsletter. And
That is
so
absolutely true. All
join
those
me.
links are in the show notes, by the way, for your newsletter, for
Yes.
your Spotify audio experience, also your website. All of those things are in the show notes for people to access. Jude, what's one question I should have asked you but didn't?
Ooh. That is a great question. What would I tell my past self? And I think the answer to that is perspective versus vision. We are all born with the ability to see. We have two eyes. We're born with ability to see, but without the right set of lenses on, we don't have the right perspective. I can't read the words that are coming across the screen. And so it is important to sharpen your perspective in order to continue this journey called life, in order to improve and make the best of where you're going in your life to fulfill your purpose. So I think that's the one question, is what would I tell my past self?
Attitude is everything, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
It truly is. You can have the same exact situation, and your attitude about it is what actually matters.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody who just started a live show and is on this journey of dramatically demonstrating their uniqueness and awesomeness? Hashtag asking for a friend.
What is the one thing you have that no one else can duplicate? Show that in every episode. That is the advice. So there's one thing I do. I mean, you've seen it. I show up to my talks, and it's dramatic demonstration. It is truly making the conversations we have three-dimensional. It's not just one-dimensional. It's three-dimensional. But what is that one thing for you? What is the one thing that you can do easily, such that by doing it, it makes it easier to produce your podcast or produce your live show? So that's very high level, philosophical. I'll make it very ground level. Do some live brand strategy sessions.
Interestingly enough, Jude Charles, I didn't want to muddy the waters to tell you that I actually am doing a 12-episode series on a new network called 100 TV, and the show's called Business in the Raw, and it is exactly that. It is following one entrepreneur through their transformation of being retired from a traditional career and starting a new chapter as an entrepreneur, and what is going to come out of that. So, I mean, I didn't want. I would say I'm doing it. I'm doing that thing. Maybe you might be interested in joining us over there at Business in the Raw for a segment, because this is a very interesting voiceover artist that you might find interesting. So
Yeah,
I'll chat with that. I'll chat with you about that offline. I don't want you to feel like you gotta say yes to the dress right now, but I am doing that. So I'm blushing because that's actually a thing. So
it's smart. You're demonstrating your unique genius, and so yeah, that's the one piece of advice. Yeah, and outside of that, just share your stories. There are so many stories that we have as human beings that are important to share with others, so that they understand who we are as a human being. We do business with people that we know, like, and trust. And so as you're doing that, as you're demonstrating your expertise, your genius, make sure you're telling your story as well. So thank you for having me, though. This is been a great experience in having me here and being able to relive TCC IRL, and just
Well,
the deep conversations we've had. So yeah.
I hope you'll come back and visit sometime. And if there's anything at all in the world you ever need, the answer will be yes.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Jude Charles. I appreciate you so much. Anyone out there in live stream land, please check out the show notes so that you can go follow Jude and his incredible storytelling. You'd be a fool not to be on that newsletter. It is one of the coolest ones I've ever gotten, and I love to be on your list.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. Bye, everybody. Oops. And that